Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. So tonight I'd like to continue on this series I've been doing on the 7 factors of awakening. And I've been on the last factor of awakening, equanimity. And so this is another talk on equanimity. Just kind of fleshing it out and emphasizing different aspects of it. So this word equanimity, what is equanimity? And as I said before, it certainly was not in my vocabulary before I came to Buddhist practice. But this idea that it's a steadiness of mind and heart, maybe in the face of whatever conditions are arising, whether it's some inner turmoil or some outer turmoil, to have some steadiness, not be completely blown off guard or blown off course, maybe I should say. It's equanimity is also, and maybe another word we could use is balance. And sometimes tattramajjhatthata is this Pali word that gets translated as equanimity, and that means like standing in the middle, which also could be thinking about balance, or also a way in which to see kind of like both ends of a spectrum, or to be in the middle is to recognize that it is the middle, that there are other things around it, and not be just completely lost in whatever it is that we're lost in. And it also has this upekkha is a second Pali word that gets translated as equanimity. And this word, it probably literally means something more like looking upon. And I like this definition of equanimity because to make this distinction that looking upon as opposed to looking away. Sometimes when we think of equanimity, we think of, okay, so if you're balanced or unshakable or steady, we just assume that means you're disconnected. Because it's often how we think about things, that if you're either in the thick of it or you're disconnected from it. And so equanimity is actually something in the middle of those two. It's that you're aware of what's happening, you're connected to what's happening, you are feeling what's happening, but you're not overwhelmed by it. You're not, I said, blown off course. You still remain balanced. So maybe it goes without saying that one of the functions of equanimity, it just makes life easier if we're not caught up in the latest drama. And in drama in terms of something that's wonderful or something that's terrible. But it also helps create the conditions in which there can be some deep letting go. Right? If there's some steadiness, then it's easier to see, oh, I don't need to hold on to this. I don't need to shove this away. I'm just feeling okay and upright right here. So equanimity is also a practice or a support for letting go. And so this simile that I'd like to offer is about how equanimity is part of practice. It's part of the way that we find our ways to awakening. Hence, it's one of the 7 factors of awakening. But here's a simile that the Buddha gives. Kind of talks about equanimity in the context of purifying or shaping the mind and the heart. So this is the simile of a goldsmith, somebody who is taking gold and heating it up and then bending it to be a particular shape so that it can be some jewelry, for example, or maybe coins or something like this. So the simile goes like this. Suppose a goldsmith would prepare a hot furnace, heat up a receptacle, take some gold using tongs and put it into the receptacle. Okay, right, this isn't anything that's unusual. Have a hot place, and then put some gold in a crucible and put that in with the heat. And then the simile continues. Then from time to time, the goldsmith would blow on the gold. From time to time, the goldsmith would sprinkle water on the gold. And from time to time, the goldsmith would just look on as the gold was heating. This makes sense, right? Of course, back then they didn't have a little oven that they could dial the temperature. You had to just look at it and say, I think it needs to be a little bit more warm, and then blow on it to increase the heat or add a little bit of water to cool it down. And sometimes it was just right and to look upon. And then the simile continues. If the goldsmith were to only blow on it, it's possible that the gold would just burn up, get too hot. If the goldsmith were to only sprinkle water, it's possible the gold would cool down and would get too hard and you couldn't do anything with it. And if the goldsmith were to only look upon, the gold would not reach the right consistency. It wouldn't get up to the right temperature, that then it would be malleable and flexible. But if the goldsmith would from time to time blow on it, sprinkle water on it, or just look upon it, then it could become the right consistency. And the description of the gold, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, this long list, those exact same words are how the Buddha describes his own mind right before awakening. Having all these qualities, these characteristics. So the Buddha is pointing to with this simile that there's different things that are needed to help get the mind ready for awakening, get the mind ready for some new insights or for some letting go. You know, whether this is like the big awakening or whether it's just getting the mind ready for more freedom, whatever way that might, whatever form that might take. So, as you might imagine, this blowing on the goldsmith stands for like adding some more energy, a little bit more effort to our practice or whatever it is that we're doing. To sprinkle water on it is to kind of like allow the mind to get settled and cooled down, to be collected, concentrated. And equanimity is to just look upon. So I appreciate very much that here the Buddha is putting equanimity in the context of what's best for a practice at that time. This recognition that sometimes energy needs to be put in there. This energy can take all kinds of different forms. Maybe it's a little bit more investigation or just literally kind of like bringing up the energy. Not so much that one is restless, but just to maybe apply a little bit more effort. But sometimes what's needed is to calm down. Maybe there is too much restlessness, and to calm down. And sometimes it's just to look upon. And of course, mindfulness is the faculty that can help us determine what's needed, more energy, more calm, or just to look upon. And these four faculties, mindfulness, energy, concentration, and equanimity, are 4 of the 7 factors of awakening. So just this way in which they can all work together to help the mind become bright, I love this, and malleable, wieldy. So wieldy in terms of, it can be shaped in terms of a bracelet, earrings, or necklace, but also wieldy meaning can recognize, oh, maybe there's a different practice that's needed right here. Maybe there's rather than my usual mindfulness of breathing, I'm noticing that I'm having a lot of ill will, for example, and maybe I can do some loving kindness practice to soften the heart and mind away from some ill will. Okay, so we might say, okay, well, this equanimity thing sounds interesting, but, well, how do we cultivate that? How do we cultivate this steadiness, this balance, this seeing the big picture? And so maybe it doesn't sound like, I don't know, maybe it's not too interesting or doesn't seem like so glamorous, maybe, equanimity. But when we put it in the context of what our minds are usually doing, right? They're always trying to go towards the pleasant and the exciting, or to get away from the pain and blame and loss and all these uncomfortable things. So it's not the usual way in which our minds are, to have this balanced and steady way. So what are some things that we might do to support some equanimity? Last week I spoke about the importance of some cultivating well-being and warm-heartedness. A number of ways we can do that. Maybe I'll just say some loving kindness practice as an obvious way for some well-being and warm-heartedness. And I like this modern day simile that Rob Burbea uses, another Dharma teacher uses to describe well-being as a support for equanimity. He says, imagine that you don't know how to swim and you end up falling overboard and you're in some water. And then maybe you are, and because you don't know how to swim, you're like thrashing about, maybe expending energy in ways that aren't so helpful, and you have this panicky feeling. But now imagine if you don't know how to swim, but you have a life jacket on, and you get put in the water. Then you have this buoyancy, and you have this feeling like, okay, I don't know how to swim, but I'm not going to drown. And maybe you could find a way to kick or swim a little bit, paddle to where you need to go, so you don't have that panicky feeling. So we might imagine that the well-being or some warm-heartedness is a way that can be like a life jacket, that when we do find ourselves in a place that's uncomfortable, not knowing how to swim when you're in water, but it gives us some buoyancy and some steadiness. So what are some other things that might support equanimity? What are some practical things that we might do? So some of you know that equanimity is one of the Brahma Viharas, which is a meditation practice. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Equanimity is part of a Brahma Vihara. But I would like to say something that we can do in meditation practice. And that is maybe just at the beginning of our mindfulness practice to spend, 5 or 10 minutes, just kind of this with a settling. And sometimes it can be helpful to just drop in, and maybe the same way that we do with Brahma Vihara practice, where we kind of like drop in an intention. But for equanimity practice, to drop in, may I see the world with quiet eyes. May I see the world with quiet eyes. So it's not a demand, it's not a plea, it's just setting the intention. This idea of quiet eyes is not a usual language, and maybe there's some wiggle room in there in which you can find what resonates with you in this kind of unusual expression. So this might be something that if you find yourself really restless, maybe you could drop in. Or at the beginning of a practice when you feel like you'd like to cultivate some equanimity is, may I see the world with quiet eyes. Or maybe there's some practices in daily life that we might do to support equanimity off the cushion. And this is something that's been really helpful for me, that when I first tried this, I thought like, oh, okay, Diana, this is good that you're doing this practice. And this is to evenly apply attention to all stages of a project. The planning, the doing, and the cleaning up. Is there a way in which we can just evenly apply attention to all three of those stages? So when I heard about this, I thought, okay, I'll do this for this next meal that I'm going to make. Okay, planning, I can pay attention to that. Preparing, I can pay attention to that. But I did not want to pay attention to cleaning up. There was something about like, oh, cleaning up. Okay, that's just something I'm going to do quickly, and that's the last thing I got to do to finish up. I just really didn't notice how much I was like in a hurry. I didn't want to do it. I felt like, oh, this is the extra stuff. But there's a way in which we can just notice how much of our life is kind of like planning, preparing, doing, and cleaning up. And is there a way in which we might notice that we only pay attention between one of those three stages? And can we notice, if we are not paying attention, just bring a little bit more attention to that? And then this, of course, it turns out, I'll speak for myself, it turned out to be much more delightful to be paying attention after cleaning up after a meal. And I'm not going to say that I'm always doing this. Sometimes I'm like, with the dishes. Not my favorite thing to do, but this is one thing that we can do of equanimity off the cushion to support is just pay attention to, or equal amounts of attention to all the phases of a project. But what are some wisdom practices that we can do to support equanimity? Of course, equanimity, as I've been talking about, is part of the path of practice and is a big support for awakening. And of course, wisdom is a part of that too. So what are some other practices that we might do either in daily life or in meditation as a support? And one is, just like I was talking about, paying equal attention to all three stages of a project, whatever that project might be. So, like, just noticing in particular something. In the same way, we can notice the changing nature of things. Really tune in to the way things that arise and pass away. Tune into that things aren't always exactly the same. So this is a little bit different than straight up mindfulness, more that we're kind of like highlighting a certain aspect of our experience. And certainly within mindfulness, we do notice things arise and pass away. But is there a way in which we can tune into, be sensitive to, pay attention to that particular quality of all of our experiences? They're arising, they're passing, they're starting, they're ending, and they're changing. They're like getting modified as time goes on. And this is a practice because, like, all of us know, we all know things are impermanent, right? Intellectually, we understand this. This isn't news to anybody, but is there it can be a practice to just tune into this particular quality of all of our experiences. And there's a way in which transformation can happen, in which when we tune into certain things over and over and over again, then of course seeing this change or fluctuation in all scales, right? Really small scales, really the immediate changes of things, or the big scale, the changes of the season, or in the beginning of fall. And starting to see that it changes the way our relationship to what's happening. If we're noticing that everything's changing, then it's not quite as attractive to want to really hold on to it, because it just doesn't make sense to hold on. It doesn't make sense to try to grab something that's like slipping away. And so we might even notice in our daily life, reflection, are our moods exactly the same from the moment we wake up until we go to sleep? How many different moods did we have? How many different thoughts did we have? How many different things did we eat? So just focusing on that particular aspect of our experience, the mind and the heart can start to let go, because they see that things are not worth clinging to. And with that letting go, this not clinging, is a way in which we can maintain some of our balance or steadiness, because we're not trying to like grab onto things that are slipping away, or we're not trying to push things away so strongly, because we're not insisting that things be a particular way. We're recognizing that they arise and pass away. Another practice that we can do, whether it's in practice or in daily life, is what would it be like to not immediately have an opinion about everything? This is good, this is bad. This is really good and this is really bad. Or something like this. I mean, so often we have opinions. And of course we do, right? Things are pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. But an opinion is more like when we've kind of wrapped up a sense of who we are with our, whether we like it or don't like it. Often opinions are a way in which we kind of define ourselves. I'm the person that likes this. We don't say it that way in our minds, but it's definitely part of the way that we identify or get identified or create a self, is to cling on to a view. It's also part of the way in which we align ourselves with certain groups of people and distinguish ourselves from other groups of people. So what would it be like to soften that and to not immediately have an opinion, this is good or bad? Might say, well, right now it feels unpleasant. And just end it with that. It feels unfortunate. This feels pleasant. And end it with that. Maybe some of you know this Zen story of this farmer who is farming, and he has a horse, and he uses the horse for farming to help maybe drag the plow, or maybe he rides the horse to help bring the animals in from pasture, the livestock in, or all these types of things, right? I can use a horse. And then one day the horse runs away, and the farmer doesn't have a horse anymore. It's some difficulty for him. And then some of the villagers come by and say, oh, we're so sorry to hear that your horse ran away. This is such bad luck. And he says, bad luck, good luck, who knows? And the villagers think that's kind of an odd response, but they just go on their way. And then sometime later, when he's working, now it's a lot of work, right, without a horse, and he sees that his horse is returning. And it brought with it other horses, some wild horses that it had befriended. So these other horses arrive with his original horse, and they follow the original horse into the corral, and he closes the gate, and like, oh, now he has more horses. This is a fabulous thing. So then the villagers stop by and say, wow, this is what good luck you have that your horse brought back these other horses. And he says, good luck, bad luck, who knows? And they think, okay, this guy's really odd person, but that's all right. So then his son is trying to work with these new wild horses so that they can really work there on the farm. And while the son is working with them, he gets kicked by one of the horses and gets really injured badly. Broken leg and maybe some broken ribs, if they're not sure. So the villagers hear about this and say, oh, this is terrible that your son has this broken leg and is really injured. This is really unfortunate. It's really bad luck. And the farmer says, bad luck, good luck. Who's to say? Who knows? So now, right, here's more work for this poor farmer. He has more horses, but his son isn't able to help. His son can't walk, really sick or injured. And then the army comes by, and they're going to conscript any able-bodied young men. Here's the son, of course, who has this broken leg and is really sick and injured, and so he doesn't get conscripted into the army. And so the villagers say, wow, what good luck that your son didn't get taken to get put in the army. And you know what he's going to say, right? Good luck, bad luck, who's to say? So maybe we have our own versions of this, our story of this. Maybe we had some heartbreak when we were young and didn't end up with a person that we thought we wanted to, but then later found somebody that was a better fit for us. Or maybe the same way with a job. Maybe there was a job that we didn't get, but then we were able to get another job. Or all of us have some stories about this. I know that I have too. Like when I reflect back on my life, some things that at the time felt really were heartbreaking for me, but now I see, oh, yep, I couldn't have had this life now if that had happened, and this life that I have now is so much better. So maybe that's true for you also. Maybe there have been some things that at the time felt terrible, but turned out in a bigger picture to not be so bad, or maybe even to be great. So equanimity is part of this not having this opinion and really holding on to it. Oh, this is terrible, right? Maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it's not what you wished, but we're just a reminder that things might turn out, in the bigger picture, differently. So another maybe reflection to help support equanimity is often when we talk about equanimity, it's a support of these 8 worldly winds, these 8 conditions that affect everybody, without exception, absolutely everybody. And a modern translation or interpretation of them we could say is success and failure, status and disgrace, approval and disapproval, and ease and unease. I said undies, like underwear. I don't know, but that's the opposite of ease, but ease and unease. And so we can reflect about these. We can use our wisdom and just, maybe I'll just choose one of them, this one, approval and disapproval. If we think about it, that this is about what other people think. Approval and disapproval. And can we really control what other people think? No, we can't. We know this, right? We all know this. So is there a way that can we control the thoughts of others? How many thoughts do people have? Maybe that's just one thought that they had, that they weren't so approving of something that we did. And the news cycles and the big picture, but even the news cycles in our little lives, right? What's so interesting, it's going to be different very soon. So it's not that at that time necessarily that people are going to remember this approval or disapproval. So maybe just kind of some reflection on this, recognizing that it's not, we can't control what other people say or think, and it's going to change anyway soon. And then lastly, I'll say that maybe just this acknowledgement of things that are uncomfortable or difficult. Again, this is a reflection or an acknowledgement. Is one way is strengthen our capacities. It's not what we want, but maybe it's how we learn some things that are difficult. We learn how to be courageous only when there's opportunities in which there's fear. Maybe we learn to be patient only when we're feeling impatient. So in the same way, whatever it is, the difficulty that we are having to work with and that we are not feeling equanimity, maybe it can be helpful to kind of reflect on the bigger picture and recognize that, okay, I'm learning something important here. And maybe it's not even clear what it is, but difficulties are a way in which we can stretch our capacities. And we all have this, I've heard of this expression, I wouldn't have wished this on my enemy, but I can see how it was really helpful for me. It doesn't make the difficulty different, it doesn't make it easier, but that is one way in which we can see the bigger picture and might be able to not feel off balance with some of the difficulties. And maybe I'll close with this one quote, which is from the Therigatha. These verses from some monks. They're kind of part of their awakening verses. And this is the verse from Subhuti. And this is something that he describes after his awakening. But I think it beautifully describes equanimity. My little hut is roofed and pleasant, sheltered from the wind. So rain, sky, as you please. My mind is serene and freed. I practice wholeheartedly. So rain, sky, as you please. So this idea of having a roofed and pleasant hut, like he has this steadiness, and he's this practice wholeheartedly, that he's like giving himself to the practice. So it's okay if it's really hot in the sun, or it's okay if it's really raining and cold. He's okay. He's okay. So one way to think about equanimity. So now I'd like to open it up to some questions or comments about equanimity or some things that I've said here. Does anybody have some questions or comments, including anybody that's online with us? The sage behind you, Jim, has a question.
Thank you so much. The question I wanted to ask is basically making a comparison between the idea of equanimity and the doctrine of not self. It seems like these two are very closely connected, because the departure from our expectations about
I'm sorry, the last part I didn't hear.
Sorry, I mumble a lot. The departure from our expectations about the little self in our stories about ourselves is where the angst comes in, I guess. And I was just wondering, are there sort of practices that are equanimity plus not self, or good ways to put that into practice, I guess?
For both not self and equanimity? I would say equanimity, by definition, as you kind of pointed out, helps soften the sense of self, because might even say that whenever we are really holding on really tightly, that's when there's the self is really there, and there's so many things, right, that we can hold on to. So I would say any practice that helps soften the clinging or the holding on will support equanimity and the lessening of a sense of self. Is that helpful?
Most definitely. Thank you. I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, and maybe I could say something else that I talked about it earlier with equanimity, not on tonight's talk, but one thing is something else that's a support for equanimity is to recognize, oh, things are arising because this condition is in place, and that condition is in place, and that condition is in place. So of course it's arising here. So that same thing, seeing the conditionality of things, also really supports not seeing that, oh, there isn't a self here, there's just all these conditions. So, yeah, great, thank you. Anybody else have a comment or question? Okay. Very nice. So thank you for your kind attention, and may you feel some balance and steadiness and ease in your practice and in your life. Thank you very much.